Hello there. This video is going to focus on edTPA Task 2 rubrics. So the idea here is just like in the first video with Task 1, is just to go through the rubrics and get a sense of what they're asking for. So what you're looking at right now is the page in all of the handbooks that shows the overview of Task 2, right? So you can see here, it's a little bit shorter than task 1. Doesn't mean that it's that much easier. So task 2 is focused on instruction. Task 1 was on planning. This one's focused on instruction. And part of the requirement is having a video recording where you can send in video clips as part of your submission. I guess I should mention, although I know this will be dated pretty quickly, but I guess I should mention that with the pandemic, instruction task 2 has not been part of the portfolio recently. I'm sure that will change again. So just something to keep an eye on. I'll go over this as if it's going to be required again, which I'm assuming it will be. So the first bullet point there is obtain required permissions for video recording. Okay, that's sort of an obvious thing. The second one, identify lessons for the learning segment you planned in planning task 1 to be video recorded. So here you have just a small section of your teaching, and it obviously has to be part of the 3 to 5 hour, 3 to 5 lesson learning segment. Okay, so you're going to analyze and interpret evidence and or data that have collected or selected. In this case, this is from the science handbook, so this is not going to apply to everybody, but you can see there's probably in your handbook, if you're not science, there's probably some connections to your content there. So as you read along, you'll see that kind of stuff pop up, right? The next one, video record your teaching and select 2 video clips no more than 10 minutes each, but no less than 3 minutes combined. So you can see that there's not a lot of video in terms of minutes here. So the question is going to be, well, what should you be recording? And we'll get into the rubrics itself to figure out what's going to be the best approach there. Okay. And last but not least, analyze your teaching and your students' learning in the video clips and provide answers to prompts. Okay, so I'm going to skip down from the overview. I'm going to go through all the task 1 information and start with task 2 for today. All right, so let me just get there. All right, here we are. So it's page 18 in science, maybe somewhere around there for you. Okay, so everything here is just the overview of what we just went through, just in more detail. All right. So, instruction commentary. So what should you be writing about? You can see the list of things here. All right. Again, I'm just going to focus on the rubrics primarily. All of these elements will come up to some degree through the rubrics themselves. So rubric number 6. How does the candidate demonstrate a safe and respectful learning environment that supports students' engagement in learning? This one is sort of universal across all the content areas. So let's start with level 3. The candidate demonstrates rapport with and respect for students. And candidate provides a positive, low-risk learning environment that reveals mutual respect among students. As with all of the other level 3s, sounds pretty good, right? What more could you ask for? Well, let's see, right? So anyway, that is good. Anytime we observe a teacher and who has that kind of climate, that's great, right? That's what we're looking for. So what's level 4? The new pieces is in the second part there, and it says provides a challenging learning environment that promotes mutual respect. So the difference there is just what it says, which is that it's clear, at least to the evaluator, that the environment is one that's challenging them to keep learning, right? To keep going for the next thing. Okay, well, yeah, sure, that makes sense. And then level 5 provides opportunities to express varied perspectives. So if you combine them all, right, we're really looking at a challenging climate where students are encouraged, and this would be obvious in the video, right? Where they are encouraged to provide varied perspectives about content. So, sometimes varied perspectives may not come up. And so in that case, as a teacher, it's something that you would actually sort of overtly want to see if students are going to go there. So whether students do it on their own, or even better, teacher really guiding students into that kind of space where they're showing or sharing different perspectives. Okay. 7. How does the candidate actively engage students in analyzing and interpreting? There you go. Okay, so this is something that's very specific to science. But if we sort of look at this, you can see how it applies sort of more generally, right? This kind of thinking, analyzing, interpreting, predictions, evidence-based explanations, all of these are very definitely have a place in science. So they're very science content specific. But there's going to be elements in your rubrics that have their own content area specific thing going on. So let's just look at sort of generally what we're being asked to do here, right? So level 3, candidate supports students in being able to do all the things we just mentioned, right? And students refer to evidence and data. But here's the kicker, at least in the science content, they do not explain how they support support an explanation, right? So the students are, sort of giving their ideas. It's obvious that the teacher is supporting students in creating an evidence-based explanation. So that's all good. But obviously where we're going to go from here is that students do explain. This is level 4 now, right? You see the bold there. Students explain how evidence and or data and another and, so these things both have to be present. Acceptable science concepts support an explanation or prediction. So if you look at this from a science teacher perspective, again, level 4 just seems like, oh, yeah, of course I would be doing that, or at least be aiming to do that, right? Encouraging and supporting students to provide these explanations and do so in depth to some degree. In your content area, it's going to be a different set of skills, but nonetheless, watching how the students are engaging in those kinds of skills. So what's really the pattern here, right? Generally speaking, the pattern is going to be students are involved in doing something, level 3. Students are going to be directing things a bit more, level 4. And even more so, level 5. And in this case, it's that students are supporting or refuting alternative explanations. So alternative explanations is not something that's brought up in level 3 or 4. So again, for science, that makes sense. And for the other content areas, it's going to be a very similar pattern of moving from students doing pretty well on something to being more directed on something and even more directed or more nuanced in some particular way. So you just need to pay attention to what that is in your content area. Again, pause the video and take a look at it and make sure it makes sense for you. Okay? The other part of this is you can see that there's the two-parter. Let me go back to 6 for a second, right? So if you look at this rubric, you just see the one row across. Rubric 7, you see the 2 rows. Ooh, right? So much fun. So now let's pay attention to that second row. Candidate links prior academic learning to new learning. Okay. So that's level 3. Level 4, candidate links both prior academic learning and personal, cultural, and community assets to new learning. And you would have seen that. You may remember that kind of phrasing already from one of the task 1 rubrics. And then last but not least, candidate prompts students to link prior um, academic learning and personal, cultural, community assets to new learning. So there's not really a huge difference there, 4 and 5. It's really just a difference that the student teacher here, is supporting the students to do the linking of that on their own, as opposed to level 4, where the teacher is doing it for the students, right? So there you go. Again, look over your content area for this second row as well to see how it's written, but it's going to be more moving towards candidate or the student teacher supporting students to do that kind of work on their own, right? You're not doing it for them. So, all right. Again, pause if you need to. Rubric 8. How does the candidate elicit responses to promote thinking and understanding of science concepts and abilities to apply scientific practices during scientific inquiry? Okay, so rubric 8 is just deepening student learning. So everybody's going to have something along those lines. Again, this is obviously content area specific, but generally speaking, it's about deepening student learning. So if you don't focus on the science concepts so much here, and just think about your content area, or look at the rubric in your handbook, you'll see that going on. So what's level 3? The candidate elicits student responses related to understanding. Okay, so the way that this one is written, science concepts, yep, and then scientific practices through inquiry, and or. So this is interesting. This is the first time we're seeing an and or together. So in both cases, basically if you hit all 3 of these bullets, then that's the and. If you do the first 2 and leave out the last one, or 1 and 3, that's the or. Okay. So what's the difference here between level 3 and level 4? The candidate elicits and builds on students' own ideas about. Okay. So in level 3, elicits student responses. Level 4 elicits and builds on students' ideas. Okay. So that should be pretty clear. And level 5, again, this is about deepening student learning, right? So that's what we're looking for here as a general pattern. So what's level 5? Candidate facilitates interactions among students so they can evaluate their own, and then you see the list there with an or. Okay, so the real, it's not so much the concepts or the skills themselves, it's more of the way in which you're engaging the students to deepen their own learning. It's not terribly different than the rubric on engaging student learning either, right? They're very similar in that sense, where the pattern is to go from sort of being teacher-directed to being student-directed. So that's your pattern. And again, it's going to come up several times in this kind of way. Okay, rubric 9. Again, we're very content specific here at this point. How does the candidate facilitate students' analysis of the evidence or data based on scientific inquiry? So the pattern here again is going to be, in this case, it's sorry, let me back up here. This is again content area, right? Analyzing evidence and or data is not something that you're going to see for every content area. But what's the overall pattern here that we're looking for? Obviously, it's going to be deepening in some kind of way. So, level 3, candidate asks students to present and record information and or data in tables, maps, diagrams, and other graphical and statistical displays. So that's one. And then the other one here is the and. Candidate guides students to find patterns and or inconsistencies in the data. Right. So there's a lot of teacher-oriented work going on here. Right. Level 4. What's the difference? I'll go down to the second one. Candidate facilitates a data analysis discussion where students demonstrate the ability to find the patterns and or inconsistencies in the data. So obviously more student directed than level 3. And then level 5, candidate leads students to consider limitations of evidence and or data, methods used to collect evidence and or data and or analysis and or. Okay, anyway, what's the point? The point here is that we go from level 3, which is much more teacher oriented, to level 4 and 5, which become more and more student directed, and they're doing, in this case with science, so they're doing their own analysis, and the candidate here, the student teacher, is being supportive of that process but not providing all the answers up front. Okay. Last but not least, rubric 10 for task 2, analyzing teaching effectiveness. Okay, how does the candidate use evidence to evaluate and change teaching practice to meet students' varied learning needs? So this one's going to be more across the board with content areas. You're going to see very similar, if not exactly the same language for rubric 10. So what are we looking at here? A candidate proposes changes that address students' collective learning needs related to the central focus. Candidate makes superficial connections to research and theory. So that research and theory thing, let me deal with that one first. You've seen that before. So again, going from just sort of quick snippets of connections. Look, if you make no connections, you're in level 2. So you do need to make some connections at least, right? So 3 becomes 4, which is basically deeper connections, more, just sort of a better, in a way, this is a writing assignment, right? So really put on your your academic writing hats here, okay? And then level 5 is the same. It's just you're very in tune with the research and theory, okay? It's just more so, right? Ranging from superficial, making mentions of, to really being informed by, which would be level 5, and sort of somewhere in between is level 4. Okay, but if we deal with the first paragraph now between level 3 and 4, so the difference is going from the candidate proposes changes that addresses students' collective needs related to the central focus. It jumps to individual and collective learning needs. So you saw this pattern before in task 1 rubrics as well, where you're moving from the overall teaching to the classes as one large group to meeting individual needs while also meeting the more collective learning needs. Okay, and again, excuse me, this is important to note. The learning outcomes need to be really tightly aligned to the needs that you're meeting. So in your writing of the prompts, you need to really make sure that that's obvious and clear. And then if it's strongly connected and just in a very high quality way, then you're at level 5, right? If it's connected to research and theory. Okay, so that pretty much sums up 2. Task 2 is not something that you can do a lot of ahead of time, although yeah, you can get some of that stuff up in writing. I would recommend that, but you really do have to wait until you get the video recordings and things taught. Obviously, the hiccups are always going to be what's going on with your students in those days. Again, I highly recommend that you have at least 2 classes going where you can do, hopefully there's the same kind of prep, right? It's really much more difficult if you're doing two different preps because you got to rewrite a whole lot of a lot of changes, right? But nobody expects the students to be perfect. It really comes down to you and how you're interacting with them, how you're supporting them, how you're getting them to ask questions about content, and how you're getting them to interact with each other, and how you're connecting to research and theory along the way to make whatever decisions you're making. So try to keep that stuff as tight as possible in this task 2, and especially when you write it, and really use clear evidence from the videos about how you think that supports what you think was happening, right? And if you think that you were doing something in a level 4 or level 5, you really want to highlight that in your writing, right? Make the writing as clear and concise as possible. And I'll add this one more thing, is that the evaluators don't spend a lot of time looking through the whole portfolio. So the more you can be clear, concise, on point, and making the connections for the reader, for the evaluator, the more likely your score is going to be pretty solid. So, all right, that's it for task 2. I will see you in task 3. Cheers.